Welcome to the LSI Behind the Wind podcast. I'm Lauren Lane. For 50 years now, the LSI team has dedicated themselves to the science of business development. We've seen the impact of our work and how it's evolved into economic development and now social impact work. This week, Sean and I are going to talk about the F-16 TCG Worldwide Review that was held here in Ogden, Utah a few weeks ago, and LSI supply chain management expertise. So, hey Sean, how's it going this morning?
Hey, Lauren, thanks for joining me on this episode, and I'm excited to talk to you. We have, for the last 30 years, we have put together the F-16 Technical Coordinating Group Worldwide Review, and in concert with that conference, we thought we'd record an episode about supply chain and logistics for a number of reasons. One is that I was asked to be a keynote speaker at this year's F-16 TCG and was honored to do that. And you had this great idea of let's replicate this presentation that I gave at the conference and just talk about LSI supply chain capability in general. So I appreciate you doing this episode with me and talking about this discipline, which is a big part of our legacy.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's fun being on back-to-back episodes. But yeah, the TCG conference was phenomenal. It was awesome to meet so many of our clients and our community partners. I really enjoyed getting to know several of the foreign military members that were able to attend. I got to know a couple of them, so it was fun to finally meet them in person. And I could tell that a lot of people were still itching to talk to people in a post-COVID world. So it was good to see everyone, and I thought it was all in all success. So
it was great. This was started by LSI in the early 1990s. For years, there had been these conferences where we would pull together the countries that had these various platforms. And when the F-16 had been sold to a lot of these other countries, we thought it would be a great idea to bring the countries together and talk about technology and changes and sustainment strategies for the weapons system. And so that started over 30 years ago at Hill Air Force Base and has been a central part of the F-16 program for 30 years, with the exception of 2020. I think every year for 30 years we've held this conference. LSI has been a major contributor and supporter of the conference, and like I said, was honored this year on my 30th year attending this conference to be a keynote speaker and talk about something that's such a challenge and so important to a lot of the F-16 contractors, which is supply chain management.
Yeah, I agree. It was awesome to hear you speak at this conference, but I also thought it was interesting because LSI kind of plays a unique role in all of this, where we're not necessarily flying the planes or producing the parts for the planes, but we're that middleman between all of this, and it's an interesting place to be in.
I agree. Just some additional background. The F-16 for 30 years has been the primary fighter for the U.S. Air Force, and I think there was about 4,000 F-16s produced over the last now 45 years. Production started in the early 70s, and then I think first in operation 1975 is when the system was inducted into the inventory. And LSI has been a part of this important program since the beginning, including helping to bring the F-16 workload to Hill. We had a active wing at Hill Air Force Base for a lot of years. It's now an F-35 wing, the 388th and 419th combined wing. But at one time, both the 388th and 419th wings were F-16 wings and now F-35 wings. So this is this system and the concept in general has been a part of our DNA for 50 years. It really, early on in the company's history, we were involved in the F-16 acquisition, initial acquisition, and then over the last 50 years have been providing support and sustainment through supply chain management for a 50-year period of time. So you're right, it's critical. This conference, as I said, I think there's now almost 40 countries that are flying the F-16, even though it seems like this is an old weapon system, and Lauren, older than you. It is it's still a critical system and a major asset in a lot of air forces across the globe. And so, like I said, 40 countries, I believe, are flying the F-16 approximately, and they all are in various stages of service. And some of these aircraft are pristine. Some of them have been flown a lot and have been neglected. And so bringing together all of the countries that use these aircraft and the contractors that provide sustainment and both the commodities, the repair for this weapon system of across the globe it is significant. So a lot of the conference was about long-term sustainment for the F-16, which was supposed to be flown for a few years, and now nearly 50 years later, it's still flying across the country and around the world. And how do we keep these fleets operational long-term? And we've done this with a lot of clients and a lot of different platforms, state, federal, municipal platforms. And this year we've talked in a lot of our episodes, we focused really heavily on the FedCiv organizations and all the work that we're doing, but the DNA of LSI, and as we continue to celebrate our 50th year, the DNA started with supply chain management and what we called logistics 50 years ago. And that is, how do we keep a weapon system or any system such as the F-16 operational, mission capable is what we call it, and coordinating all of the commodities and services necessary to keep that system mission capable. And supply chain is this science of supply chain management is so critical to the overall strategy and sustainment of these fleets of F-16.
So we've been doing this for 50 years, and I know our supply chain and logistics team has, evolved and grown with the F-16 planes. Would you say that the process for procuring these parts and the people needed and the maintenance, would you say it's gotten more complicated to find these parts as it's grown across the world? Or do you think it's become easier because it's more available? Like what does that process become like over the years?
It's changed radically. I look back on my 30 years of supporting the F-16 as part of my career, and I look at some of the various large acquisitions and sustainment efforts, both organic and inorganic, and just like we've talked about in previous episodes, the overall federal procurement process has changed. What used to be these large technical volumes and proposals that were 5,000 pages are now, maybe 30 pages. And in a lot of cases, if you're an approved source, meaning that you have been pre-authorized to supply this commodity or service. It could be as simple as a delivery schedule and price, and that's it. That's your whole proposal. So it has changed radically in the last 30 years. In terms of availability, I mean, the F-16 has always been well supported. I think part of that was that the initial strategy of the Air Force was that they were going to buy the engineering data initially from General Dynamics and then from Lockheed Martin. And so a lot of the engineering data was owned by the Air Force, where they could take that engineering data and procure and find different sources. If they lost a source, if there was an issue, a quality issue with a source, they had the data where they could say, this is what we're looking for, and this is, can you provide this product or service to support the sustainment of the weapon system, because they had that data. Also, I think it was unique over the years where the F-16 depot and the F-16 program office were co-located. And so that coordination between the depot maintenance side and the requirements side, the logistics side, was unique. And in a lot of ways, there was this great collaboration between the shops and the logistics organizations, where they were in lockstep on, this is what the requirements look like, this is what we're seeing, and challenges and also success, and they could share that with the other countries. When I said that, why is there such collaboration with the countries, the various countries flying the F-16 and the U.S. Air Force? Part of it is that almost half of the F-16s produced, like I said, initially by General Dynamics and then by Lockheed Martin, half of them were sold, half of the total production was sold to foreign military countries, or what we call foreign military sales, FMS sales. And many of these countries had relatively small fleets. Even a fleet of 400 aircraft for a country, which is actually one of the larger fleets, if they were ordering 400 parts, the U.S. Air Force may be ordering 1,800 parts for their inventory. So there was some economy of scale. There was this, in many cases, a lot of these countries had FMF, foreign military funding, which was funding through the U.S. government that flowed through the U.S. Department of Defense as part of our U.S. aid to various countries for military and political purposes. And so they were mandated to do these acquisitions through the U.S. Air Force or DLA at some point, the Defense Logistics Agency. So it's been an interesting program, unlike anything else. I mean, the F-35 may or may not still. There are many countries that are flying the F-35 or looking at the F-35, including some of the legacy F-16 countries. But I mean, in the history of the defense, there was never a system, a platform that was sold to so many different countries, and such collaboration. And this conference, the F-16 Technical Coordinating Group Worldwide Review, historically has been a forum where these topics would come up. The various countries would share maintenance challenges that they were having or things that they were seeing and technology advances that could be implemented onto this F-16. And the F-16 also, I think it's been an interesting concept where it was really it was a platform. It has been a platform over the years where it was so versatile, so easily, you could really plug and play a lot of different technology. So there was an opportunity to keep this fairly old platform relevant with modern technology. And some of these planes have flown 4,000 hours or more and still going strong.
So that's fascinating, by the way. So I guess maybe this speaks to my newness, but I have kind of a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
So the F-16 has been around forever. I'm assuming the F-35 is a newer version of this plane.
Well, if you're not in this business, you would think that. The F-35 concept is now coming up on 25 years old.
So it's just as old, kind of.
We think of, all of the F-22, the F-35, all of the technology is all 20, 30 years old, and it's a platform that our clients have been able to implement new technology to remain relevant in our country's defense, and then implemented this with the other countries that use these platforms. And there's been nothing like the F-16 that has been so versatile. It is the Swiss Army knife of the Air Force. And at some point, I remember when the F-4, which I had worked on previously, I remember when they finally retired the F-4 and how these people that had worked on the F-4 their whole career, and they were crying, and it was so emotional to see this platform be retired and go out of the inventory, mothballed, and I can remember at the time. This was probably in the mid 1990s. I was thinking, why is everybody so emotional? I understand that now. The F-16 for me has been, for our company has been 50 years almost of just incredible projects, and a lot of that ties back to supply chain management, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But does that answer your question?
It does. So then I guess after hearing you talk about the F-4, do you think there will ever be a time where the F-16 is no longer relevant, where it gets shoved out for something new?
They've been talking about this for a long time, and that's always been the concept with these other platforms, and then they've just never been able to pull the trigger on this, where they can justify replacing these fleets with whatever else, the F-22, the F-35, some new fighter. I really, if I was giving advice to the Air Force and the Pentagon, my advice would be, we need platforms that we can quickly develop and quickly produce and that remain relevant. And that has to do with the larger picture of supply chain. I gave a speech not too long ago, and somebody asked me about sustainment versus acquisition. And I said, think about having an old car. In fact, I just bought an old 911 Porsche that's
Nice.
40 years old that I'm restoring. And I've always loved these Porsches, and restoring an old 40-year-old 40-year-old vehicle is going to come with a lot of challenges, right? It's going to come with reliability challenges. It's going to come with, we don't make those parts anymore. The OEM for this doesn't exist. We're going to have to make this part. that's what we're dealing with on these older systems. And I would say until the era of the F-35, until 2000 maybe, the strategy was this rapid acquisition. It kept the inventory relevant. It created a demand for constant technology. And I feel like we've been in this dilemma of, do we take a 40-year-old platform, and a lot of the platforms are old but have been maintained exceptionally well. You look at any of these assets in the U.S. Department of Defense, and they look like they rolled off the assembly line yesterday. They're amazing what our depots have done to sustain these systems is remarkable, and they're the best in the world. I have such respect for these depots and the sustainment science of these assets. And conversely, what I think is sometimes overlooked is that if you're buying a new car every two years, you're going to, in the long run, you may spend more time, you may spend more money in this, turning this over every few years versus trying to keep a 40-year-old vehicle operational and reliable, and especially if you're using it on a daily basis. So that's really what is analogous to what has been happening for the last 20 years, is that instead of buying new assets, for the most part, we have been sustaining these assets that are 30, 40, 50 years old. And what I think is remarkable about it is that think about your iPhone, and your iPhone is a platform and you've got these various apps on it. That's essentially what has been happening with these older systems, where the new technology we've been able to just plug in new technology and keep this operational as a platform. Think of these old systems similar to your cell phone, where you're just, hey, I'm going to buy a new app that's going to give me capability to do whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like if you had like an iPhone 4, but you're running it on the iOS 16 platform.
Right, exactly. That's right. Exactly right. And the technology, I look back at the engineering and the technology from the 50s, 60s, 70s. It was fantastic. That period of time, they were so forward thinking. Those engineers were so good in creating these systems that were never intended to last this long, and they've been fantastic. And it's allowed the Department of Defense to keep these systems, some of the best systems in the world, best weapons in the world, even though they're being flown on these platforms that are 40, 50, 60 years old. I mean, the B-52, it's old.
The B-52s are ancient, but I guess that speaks to but I guess that speaks to just how important the supply chain and all of this is. If the supply chain goes down, the whole fleet essentially goes down if you don't have those new parts.
That's exactly right. And that's been our role from the beginning. And from 50 years ago, the company concept and design of the company from 50 years ago initially was, let's start with the logistics and material management, now what we call supply chain management. And it started, while today we're known for, working within a lot of the other Fed Civ organizations like Department of Energy and Transportation and Health and Human Services and Commerce and Interior. You look at all of the various federal departments where we're embedded. And in a lot of areas, I mean, California knows us as working with this state of California and the municipalities. The legacy did start in the Department of Defense, working with the large defense contractors that included many of these companies that are still our clients today: Lockheed Martin, Northrop, Raytheon, General Dynamics. And while the focus was business development, that was really, and still is, it's still our strategy, that it is the conduit for making this happen. The reality is that the supply chain, or logistics is what we referred to it 50 years ago, was why LSI exists. And it started with us saying to our defense contacts at the various Department of Defense locations, installations, and the decision makers, you tell us what your needs are, what are your needs, and we will work with our clients to fill those needs. And that really is the heart of Capture. But we had to have that deep supply chain management capability to get there. And part of the reason we were so successful in the business development science is that we had this supply chain management and logistics in our DNA, that it was about understanding what is the requirement and how can we build a solution around that requirement. It's still the heart of our business today.
That's awesome. It's a fascinating history. I'm excited to learn more.
So I think some of the things that in my discussion and presentation in my keynote during the F-16 conference, I mean, I talked about LSI's legacy and how we have been so successful in providing supply chain management, not just for our clients, but for a lot of the government entities. And I think it's even more relevant now, especially as the U.S. works to reshore a lot of the supply chain that had been outsourced to foreign entities. One of the things that I'm so proud of is the work that our team has done on major supply chain programs. I mean, we have managed significant supply chains for federal, state, municipal, and defense contractors, Fortune 500 companies, and it really has been so fulfilling to see us look at these needs and take that core capability of supply chain management and apply this to fill these challenges. I can tell you so many stories of where we have worked with our clients to reduce the production time, reduce acquisition time, reduce quality escapes, and reduce cost. All of the fundamental elements of supply chain management, our team is so adept at working. And some of the things that just in today is I look at our incredible supply chain management division and practice. I mean, we are maybe the best organization in the world at source development, looking at how do we ensure that there's redundancy and resiliency in the supply chain, so no matter what happens, we have a source. This source development is such a science of ours, and there's just not a lot of organizations that have that capability. part of source development for us is obviously ensuring that we get quality parts and services, that there is a redundancy, and our team is always looking at capacity in this supply chain, ensuring that we're not overloading the supply chain, or that there's not enough work, which is equally challenging. And we've seen that over the years, where a lot of these systems have allowed the original manufacturing vertical to just die out because there was not enough revenue. And so that's something that we're always cognizant of. Our team is phenomenal at expediting and looking at life cycle management, ensuring. It's especially with a complex commodity like engines or aircraft landing gear, or some of these forged items. A forging takes 2 years, and if you get that forging and the forging is not to the spec, or there's a quality problem, you start over. You go back again 2 years. So trying to plan for 10-year life cycles, or in some cases 30-year life cycles, has been this science that our team has just been so adept at over the years, and why we have been so good at this. I don't know. Does that answer?
Yes, it sounds extremely complex. I can't imagine the frustration that had to be learned, and the frustration of things that you didn't necessarily see coming, and then the learning of those things just year after year, or lesson after lesson. I think a lot of companies probably give up after these things, but after 50 years, it sounds like we got the process nailed down. But can't imagine the frustration that you may have experienced earlier with these 2-year parts, that just 2 years gone and down the drain if it's not completely perfect.
Yeah, it is challenging, and in ensuring that there's an inventory to keep the systems operational, and backing into that. And so it is a real science that I think is unheralded in our business, but it really is the core of our company. So identifying the right source, that we have a strong ecosystem that I'm going to talk about in just a minute, that we are ensuring that the sources have the resources that they need to be successful, that we're always looking at the engineering data and upgrades, modifications. And so we've got this incredible capability that is focused on planning and total life cycle management, from the system level down to the commodity. We're so good at pipeline management and inventory management. And you look at some of the things that we've done for clients such as the state of California, which I mentioned before, and that program has been successful for 20 to almost 25 years because of our team's incredible capability of planning and managing the pipeline, the requirements, everything that goes into this. So it really has been remarkable. One of the things that I'm also excited about and have been really involved closely on the strategy and execution is our ecosystem development. And again, this is something using the DNA of supply chain management and logistics from 50 years ago. We have built a lot of ecosystems around the world. And when I talk about, yes, go ahead.
If a person is new to the episode and they're just learning about all this, can you define what an ecosystem is and how we create those?
So our ecosystem concept is that we will take a vertical market or a commodity even and build a complete supply chain to support that requirement. And that includes developing the market itself, developing the requirements, creating a strong workforce at every step of the supply chain, from the raw materials to the delivery. And I'm going to talk about an example in a minute that is just it's tremendous. That we are working the research and development technology piece of this, that we are doing all of the business development, ensuring that there's a strong pipeline going into this ecosystem of requirements or new business to keep the ecosystem strong. Or you'll hear us talk about clusters as well. So taking let's say that we put together an F-16 supply chain. We would look at all of the requirements around the world and quantify that. We would ensure that we had all of the necessary engineering data, the workforce to support the manufacturing and services associated with this. And we start from the raw materials all the way to the delivery, the full life cycle of the supply chain. So we have successfully created several ecosystems or clusters. One that I'm so proud of is our carbon supply chain. And we started with this idea. It was a vision that one of our longtime champions approached us with, and he said, we really need to develop a capability around composite structures. And he said, we've identified 4 companies initially and that want to participate. Over the last 10 years, what we've been successful in doing is developing a cluster, an ecosystem that is comprised of 6,000 companies that have complete carbon and composite capability. We've also developed a really diverse market and demand for composite and carbon-based material that is like $12 billion annually that's flowing into this supply chain. We've worked the workforce development and training piece of this. Even the packaging, the shipping, just everything that you can imagine from the requirement pipeline to delivery, and everything in between, all the technology that exists in between. We have seen parts and components, requirements that have taken 2 or 3 years be delivered in 2 or 3 months, that have been millions of dollars. Now they're thousands of dollars. The economies of scale through this ecosystem development has just been phenomenal.
Oh, so when we say comprehensive services, we really mean comprehensive services.
And it is really convoluted and complex, and it's fun. It's fun for us to see this. We've created, I estimate we've created 20,000 new jobs in this ecosystem, and that's the kind of focus that we have when we talk about our strong supply chain capability. We've replicated this in all kinds of different industries, manufacturing, and we've gotten really specific on some manufacturing ecosystems. We've worked this around advanced power and energy. We've worked clusters and ecosystems tied to cybersecurity energy, IT, and technology. We're looking at now really specific commodities, things like batteries and other critical. The big project that we're working now is reshoring all of the computer chips and under the CHIPS initiative, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's been remarkable. It has leveraged all of our disciplines, the supply chain, the basic supply chain capability. It's leveraged our capture and proposal development, our program execution work, obviously our economic development work, as we have created thousands of new jobs and economic impact to these various economies. And then even our social impact work, where we have been able to create these jobs and then place individuals into these positions that we've created. It really has, this ecosystem work really has leveraged the capability of LSI across all of the practice areas and across all of our disciplines.
That's fascinating. It's interesting to me to see how this one facet of our business has, expanded to other people's businesses, and how it really has become such a global and community impact that just because of one person and organization, there is massive community change and uplift in the places around us, which that's fascinating to me.
It is so fun to be a part of this for my career, and it's always something exciting. It's always something different, and it taxes my my solution development capabilities. So, well, let's talk about a few current things that are going on and that I had mentioned in my presentation. One is IIJA, and we have talked a lot about the Investment, Infrastructure, and Jobs Act. There is a lot of funding that's available that is tied to domestic supply chain and ecosystem development. And we have looked at and have been working with a lot of the organizations that include Department of Commerce, the Small Business Administration, Department of Interior, even Department of Labor, HHS, that creating infrastructure that supports strong ecosystems and clusters through the IIJ or BIL funding. It's $2 trillion of funding. What I'm really proud of is that a lot of that, the templates that the Department of Commerce and EDA and other organizations, Department of Labor even, have used as the basis for this, we developed quite a long time ago. There was a number of programs that we pioneered nearly 15 years ago through the Department of Commerce, creating what at the time was called Regional Innovation Clusters, or these RIC contracts, Regional Innovation Clusters, where we would go into an area and create an ecosystem. And it was early on, it was it was more than anything creating a consortium or consortia, and it has now evolved into true hardcore logistics and lifecycle management. But as you look at the Build Back Better, IIJA, and now this CHIPS Act, LSI developed the template for this through these RIC programs that we pioneered over 15 years ago. So there's a lot of funding for supply chain, especially domestic supply chain, and source development tied to supply chain management. I'm very excited about this CHIPS Act. So just last month or July, I think it was in July, the Congress passed this act called the CHIPS Act, where the focus has been on strengthening domestic semiconductor manufacturing, all the design, research, and creating an ecosystem for semiconductor manufacturing. And this is such a critical, really a national security issue. We have, because of costs, we have allowed the manufacturing of our semiconductor technology to be outsourced to a lot of different countries. And the Congress is serious in bringing that back. And not only is this their legislation around this, but there's also over $170 billion of appropriated funding for this program. And the focus is to bring this back. There's over $50 billion of that 170 that is going into research and development. There's tax credits. I mean, there's a lot. It's a complex. It really is a complex program, which we're in the middle of, and working with some of the best manufacturers in the semiconductor industry to ensure that we have strong ecosystems and supply chains around this capability.
It's a huge deal too. I mean, chips are in almost everything now these days. I remember I was buying a new car 2 years ago, and there was no cars anywhere because there's no chips in any of them. And then I feel like every other week I see a news articles like, well, the chips for this product are no longer going to be available for the next 6 months. Good luck getting one of these products. And so I think this legislation is coming at maybe slightly late timing, but I'm glad it's here regardless.
Well, yeah, right. If you've tried to buy if you have tried to buy a new vehicle, typically it's been a problem because these manufacturers are unable to get the semiconductor parts that they need. So, that this is something that's really, I think, relevant and is going to be a fantastic supply chain ecosystem or cluster that our team is just entrenched in. Just a couple of things that you might be interested in. The CHIPS is it's an acronym. It stands for creating helpful incentives to produce semiconductors. So that's what the CHIPS Act is. And so it's even, I think, in addition to the original 170 billion, there has been additional funding added to that is nearly $250 billion in funding for this. So many of our clients that have this capability or could be a part of this overall supply chain, and we're building this out similar to the other ecosystems or clusters that we've put together in the last 20 years. This is a great opportunity with a lot of funding around it.
Sounds like it. If anyone has any questions, we'll link some emails and notifications in the show notes if you're interested and want to learn more or get in contact with us.
Perfect. I was honored to speak, and I can't emphasize enough that how important the supply chain is to our business, to America. And it really is, we overlook it oftentimes because we wrap a lot of this into what we call capture and even the execution piece of our business. But it is the heart of what we do still today and critical to the capture discipline, the capture practice, even the proposal and program execution. clearly has been the heart of our economic development practice, and a lot of the success that we've had in job creation over the last 50 years has been around supply chain and now what we call ecosystem development or cluster development. And we've leveraged that to use this as a conduit for our social impact work as well. How do we leverage these individuals who may not be traditional workers in the economy and help them plug into these high-wage jobs tied to these various clusters? It's just, you want to see how all of the pieces of LSI come together. Embed yourself into one of our regional innovation cluster contracts or one of the ecosystem development contracts. You'll see why we have made supply chain management and logistics such a critical discipline in our business. It hits every one of our practice areas: capture, proposal, program execution, economic development, and social impact. You want to see how the dots connect. Look at one of our ecosystem engagements, and you'll see it. They're using every discipline of the LSI methodology on a daily basis.
I love it, and I agree. It's a fascinating case study, and one I'm sure we'll continue to repeat many times.
Great. Okay, well, appreciate you working this episode with me, Lauren. And is there anything else that, as we wrap up, that we should include in this episode?
Nothing that I can think of, but again, if any of this we talked about in the episode speaks to you or something that interests you and your team, please feel free to reach out to us. We have subject matter experts and member of our teams who would be more than happy to walk through every step of this with you and talk about more in detail in how we can directly benefit your company. So we'd love to reach out to you.
I mean, if you're a company that needs help in supply chain management, if you are a federal, state, or municipal entity that is looking at creating jobs tied to a specific industry or a cluster, ecosystem, if you have an interest in this $250 billion project around chips, let us know. We would love to work with you.
Yes, echo that same. Well, thanks for having me today, Sean.
Thanks, Lauren. Appreciate it. And appreciate all you do. And it's been fun doing a couple of these episodes with you. Look forward to some other ones. Take care.
Take care.